Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today. And today we're going to be talking about something that's very important. It affects everyone in the United States. It will have long-lasting repercussions. This is something that is essential for us to understand. In other words, we're talking about gun control, we're talking about the Second Amendment, and we're talking about the likely gun control executive orders being issued by the Biden administration. And how will this affect you? So we're going to have a real discussion about that because I think it's very important. Now, before we get started, if this is the first time that you've been with us on this channel, we welcome you and thank you for being here. In addition, we want you to know that we do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you, talking about the issues that matter, reaching out to you on all forms of social media that we can. That would be DLive, that would be Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, taking your chats, taking your phone calls about what you think, because we believe in the First Amendment. And we hope that you'll join us in this expression of our First Amendment every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But to the issue today is the question of the Second Amendment of gun control. Now, the reason why we're taking this, we want to be very exact. If you can take an issue, an argument, and if you are able to debunk the concepts themselves to show that they are ineffective, that they are ill-conceived, that they are unconstitutional, then that concept, no matter what the law or regulation or executive order may be, is also, by its definition, unconstitutional, ineffective, and a waste of time. So it's important that we look at this, no matter what law it may be, to understand and evaluate it on its concept. If at the root and core of it, it is a fallacy, if it is incorrect or ineffective, then we need to do something else. Why waste our time? That's why we're looking at the potential executive orders coming from the Biden administration. Now, we're going to specifically be looking at the idea of ghost guns, red flag laws, background checks, the registration of firearms, age limits, and gun bans. And we're going to put that up against two cases, essentially just two examples. And if these laws cannot address those two simple cases, then what's the point of the executive orders? What is the point of the current gun control legislation fever that is sweeping the nation? We're focusing on the wrong thing. Now, we hope to be as clear and nonpartisan as possible in trying to address this as much as it's possible. But let's go through this. Now, we want to address first and foremost that we've been talking about this for quite some time. Recently, we've seen that there is an escalation in the fear surrounding the Second Amendment, fear around those who possess firearms, and we're seeing a lot of judicial activism, as we discussed on our March 25th video, talking about the Ninth Circuit Court and how it is dramatically and demonstrably changed the ability of American citizens to be able to protect themselves. We've also seen that that decision, along with a lot of the news media promotion of harrowing and horrible incidents recently, have promoted fear amongst the public. And when the public is afraid, laws get passed that may not be the best law to have. And we see that Biden's expressing confidence that a, quote, rational, end quote, gun control can pass an evenly divided Senate. That's the idea, that we're going to get rational gun control. But we have to ask the question, what is rational gun control? Take out the recent mass shootings, take out the fear and the judicial activism that we saw in the Ninth Circuit Court, and what do we really have that's being suggested either as an executive action to circumvent Congress or in Congress itself? And we know that we've heard from the, as we see here with the White House is weighing legislation, executive orders on gun control. And we know that according to the White House, that they are focusing on background checks, expansion of background checks, and the regulation and sale of untraceable homemade weapons known as ghost guns. So that's one of the first things that they're looking at. Background checks and ghost guns. This is the issue, this is the problem that they're telling us we need to address. Let's first understand, what are we really looking at? What is the history that we're talking about? And again, this is coming from Time magazine, a timeline of the major gun control laws in America. Keep in mind, as we're going through this, there are currently on the books in America at this time over 20,000, actually 22,000 gun control bills, laws, and regulations at the federal, state, and local level across this country. So it's not like gun control doesn't exist. It's not like it has not existed in America for many years. In fact, according to Time magazine, in terms of the major and national level of gun control, regulating the Second Amendment, we know that the nation, the United States, went through 143 years before there was ever a national restriction on our Second Amendment rights. That's from 1791 until 1943, when the National Firearms Act was first enacted. And that restricted the ability of the average American to be able to get a machine gun, which would be considered an assault weapon because it is a military firearm. Not semi-automatic rifles, which did exist at that time, not a repeating rifle, not because it's made out of metal or some cosmetic issue, but an actual machine gun was then made restricted. So yes, even today, you can own a machine gun. You can own a tank, a bazooka, a flamethrower, if you have the proper federal license, which is owned by about 5,000 people in America at this time. Separate of that, then that is illegal. That is not the same thing as a semi-automatic rifle, which is often confused as an assault rifle or an assault weapon or some other similar wording that assumes more violence and fear than actually should be there. Let's be honest with each other. They're not the same thing. To say that a semi-automatic rifle is the same thing as a machine gun is a lie. It's true in movies for Hollywood, but movies in Hollywood are exaggerations of the truth. That is not the reality in America, nor is it a reality in crime in America. That doesn't happen. Machine guns are not used in crime in America. Just doesn't happen. Neither are bazookas, flamethrowers, or tanks. So we need to understand that reality and understand that gun control is a relatively new idea. More than half of the American history never had this. But once we introduced restrictions on the Second Amendment, we then followed up with many of these restrictions and laws more and more frequently. But something to understand is, even as we added more and more restrictions over the years, we wound up with crime still existing. Gun crimes still exist. They have not stopped. And even though we have added more laws at the federal, state, and local level, we have not stopped criminals. In part because most of the laws that have been passed, especially at the federal level, affect legal gun owners who are law-abiding citizens. Some 99.994% of gun owners, roughly 165 million people estimated in the United States, who own 393 million guns estimated, are not a problem. And most of these laws address them. These are realities and facts. There is no partisanship to that. There is no personal opinion to that. These are facts as they exist. So now we're getting a little more subjective. And yet we have to deal with these questions. Let's look at the root core of some of the things that we're talking about. So we know that Senator Chris Murphy out of Connecticut, has put in several gun control bills, and he is looking to expand that. He is looking to get 60 members of the Senate to be able to back his expansion of background checks and gun control overall. And what is needed currently is 51. And with a Senate that is evenly divided, 50 and 50, amongst Democrats and Republicans, the vice president, which would be Kamala Harris, has the deciding vote, the 51st vote. We already know that Kamala Harris has been very active and stated on the national stage during the 2020 presidential election that she suggested that she would enact gun control laws regardless of whether or not Congress had acted, and that she is in favor of taking away the rights of American citizens to be able to defend themselves. She has said so on the campaign trail. So the fact that Senator Murphy is looking to get 60 votes is to try and give credence and credibility to the idea of gun control being a universal thing amongst Americans. That isn't correct, because as we can see in the most recent Ipsos polling, which comes from March 24th of 2021, there are fewer Americans today that believe in gun control and the gun control that is being suggested by the Biden administration and by senators like Senator Murphy and others is even less of interest to most Americans. Yes, it is 65% of Americans, according to the polling, that say that they want to see more gun control laws, but that is mostly a partisan issue. 90% of Democrats, 35% of Republicans. It is not something that is universal, nor even amongst gun owners, with only 47% saying that some kind of background checks should be promoted. So we have to be very clear. This is not a universal yes. This is definitely a partisan issue. This is something that is affected by the way the media has been presenting and promoting this. Just think of every time you see a assault in America, only certain issues are promoted, only ones that have a very specific kind of story, such as the Atlanta shooting recently, the Boulder, Colorado shooting recently. Only certain stories make the national attention, but issues like the Florida woman who was pregnant, 8 months pregnant, and defending her family with an AR-15 as her husband was being pistol whipped and her teenage daughter was being threatened with rape, that didn't get national attention. Think about the West River Church in Texas, where one of the parishioners, armed with a firearm, was able to defend and save the lives of the congregation from a criminal with an intent to kill. These are very specific stories, and they highlight very different points of view. The ones that get national attention promote fear, which encourages more and more regulation. Again, these are facts. I'm not adding any kind of personal view. This is what is happening. That being said, we also see that the news media is mixing a lot of the ideas that they are presenting. As an example, we look at the Los Angeles Times. In their article, a column, if Democrats really want gun control, Senator Dianne Feinstein needs to stay in office. This is by the Capitol journalist George Skelton on March 29th of 2021. And it starts off with, if Senator Dianne Feinstein has any hope of restoring the national ban on assault weapon sales, again, we've already stepped into sensationalization. Assault weapons are not available to the general public. You cannot go out and buy a tank. You cannot go out and buy a flamethrower or a bazooka or a machine gun. It is already restricted since 1934, as we have shown you. So to say that restoring a national ban on assault weapons is incorrect and factually a lie. There has never not been, since 1934, a restriction on assault weapons for the general populace. This is meant to set a tone. It is meant to set an idea in your mind. Again, we're going by facts, not opinions, not preferences. This is a factually incorrect statement being promoted by the LA Times. He goes on to say, or passing any gun controls. She needs help to help Democrats reform the Senate filibuster. He has now connected gun control to a partisan issue, being the filibuster. They're not connected. You don't need one to have the other. We've already established Democrats have a 50-50 split, with the deciding vote being in the hands of a Democratic vice president. You don't need to destroy the filibuster to stop the vote or to allow the vote to go through. And he goes on to say, if California's liberal Democrats want Congress to pass to regulate mass killer weapons, again, I stop. Mass killer weapons? I'm sorry, the average American does not have access to WMDs. The average American, even the non-average American, does not have access to chemical weapons, to nuclear firearms. That's just not possible. That doesn't exist in America. We don't have bunker buster bombs available to the average American. Or again, tanks or machine guns or flamethrowers or bazookas. It's not a reality. What is a mass killer weapon? That is a military firearm. Let's be exact and non-sensational. Take out the sensationalism. So he is equating in this article that mass killer weapons are a handgun, a shotgun, and a rifle. Things that have existed in America since before its creation. Things that have gone on in America for 143 years without a single regulation. A mass killer weapon has been exampled if you're saying, well, these are weapons that allow someone to kill more than one person at a time. There are examples in the United States and around the world of individuals with swords and knives that have killed more than one person at one time, and they're not considered mass killer weapons. Same thing can be said for baseball bats or cars and trucks, box cutters. Literally anything and everything that has been used to kill people in America or around the world throughout the history of time can be considered as mass killer, as more than one person at any given time has been killed by that weapon all at once. And I'm talking about in current day, not ancient times, right now in the world. So that is a sensationalization. It is meant to create fear. Between the statements of assault weapons and mass killer weapons, we have escalated the conversation. This is meant to make you afraid and to accept something that if you were not afraid, you may not accept. This is propaganda. This is sensationalization. And this is the problem. One of the problems. They go on to say that it should be required for universal background checks of all gun buyers, and that a particular senator is necessary for that. Again, we have mixed personal opinion and sensationalization with actual fact and what it may or may not be best for the nation. But let's continue to go forward, because we have to understand the circumstances to understand whether or not we can debunk this idea. And we want to go on to talk about, well, let's actually deal with the first thing first. And again, we're going to be looking at these cases because this is not new. We know, according to the NPR article on March 28th, this is not the first time that we have seen executive orders being used to try and usurp Congress, to go around the voice of the people, and to impose executive orders. And we know that 23 executive orders were executed by the Obama administration under the guidance and direction of Joe Biden. This is something that he took very seriously. And this was after the Sandy Hook school massacre. And he was tasked, then President Barack Obama tasked Vice President Joe Biden to bolster the gun laws. We know this is a fact. And 23 different executive orders on gun control were passed. And that did not stop gun crimes. Mass shootings continued in America. So executive orders do not equate to safety, because they have not equated to safety. In fact, 22,000 gun laws in America have not equated to safety. So automatically, this concept that having gun control, either through law or through executive order, will make American citizens safer is debunked. It is not true. It's not a factual connection. There is no correlation there. It does make it harder for the average American citizen, the law-abiding citizen, to have a firearm and to express their Second Amendment rights, but it doesn't make you safer. It has been shown factually to do that. And this mere simple answer to that is, we know that there have been, just most recently, 23 executive actions under President Obama. And we know for a fact that there just recently was the Atlanta and the Boulder mass shootings. Obviously, executive orders do not stop gun crime. Laws do not stop gun crime. The prohibition on murder does not stop murders. So you could say right then and there, we have debunked this issue. But let's continue and let's look a little bit deeper. One of the concerns and one of the things that people often say is, and I want to make sure that we're getting to the correct one, is we're talking about, let's look at ghost guns and gun bans. Because we're told that if we ban certain firearms, if we ban the ability of people to have these firearms and the growing number of ghost guns, which are described as firearms that are without serial numbers, we're told that we will be safer, that this will make it better for you. Because according to a anti-firearm activist, anti-Second Amendment activist, David Hogg, an 18-year-old, or no, I believe he's 21 now, who says it should not be easier to buy an AR-15 than it is to vote. Well, let's debunk that, because we know as of, and as an example, in August of 2019, according to Yahoo Finance and covered by several other news outlets, a reporter tried to buy a gun at Walmart twice, and each time they could not do so. That there were many regulations imposed by Walmart as well as by law to make sure that a person cannot just walk in and walk out with a firearm. In fact, this is not the only example of this. We know that it is not widely and easily made public where you can and can't buy a gun at, say, Walmart. And only half of their stores in the nation actually offer that service. And that there is a federal background check that is required, and that forms must be submitted, and that there must be government-issued documents with her to be able to do this, to even get the firearm, and that there is explicit training that is done. So it's not quite as simple as David Hogg would like us to think. In fact, this is something that has been repeated and done by many people in the nation. Many reporters have gone out and they have encountered the same thing, whether at gun shows or at Walmart and other retailers. You can't easily get an AR-15. As a counter to that, you have, and we saw in 2020, tens of millions did get mailed ballots for their vote in the 2020 election unsolicited. That is easier. So again, we're looking at someone who's trying to hype the situation, who's trying to use sensationalization to make you come to a conclusion that if you stopped and thought about it, you wouldn't agree with. But what about these ghost guns? Again, a major part of what the Biden administration says they're going to use their executive powers to stop. Well, how much of a problem are ghost guns? Well, we went to look up, and this is from the Brady United organization, an organization that is against the Second Amendment. They seek to stop Americans from being able to defend themselves through the Second Amendment. And the impact of ghost guns on communities. This is from their direct page, as you can see. We can see that there were 5 incidents where a firearm was used. That is, amongst all the crime, all incidents with guns in America, they cite 5 to make you be aware. They cite 3 mass shootings that occurred from 2013 until 2019. 3. That's far, far less than actually occurred in the, according to them, in the 9 years, if not including today, that would be 10 years that we've seen in this study. So they're very, very explicit, 6 years that they cite and 9 years that exist right now. That's it. So it isn't an epidemic. Going by their source alone, we see that in 2017, 3 ghost guns out of 393 million firearms owned in America, estimated at this time, 3 were recovered in 2017. Not from a shooting, they were just recovered. In 2018, there were 25 guns that were recovered. And in 2019, 116 were recovered. Again, that's not being used in crimes, that's being recovered. And we looked through various sources trying to find out, where are these ghost guns being used in crimes? There is no national data. There is no database that says that. There is no indication, according to the major news media, in searching for stories about ghost guns where we see an epidemic or a consistency in these ghost guns, these homemade firearms being used in crime. They are being found in some gun owners' homes, but they're not being used in crime. So again, we're looking at sensationalization. This is not an issue that is present or becoming a serious issue in America, as opposed to gun crime, which we have seen in 2020 skyrocket across this nation. It's been widely reported, and we have reported here, how in New York State, we had an over 100% increase in the number of gun homicides. It's a similar number in many other states: Washington State, California, Illinois, Washington, D.C. And by the way, each and every one of those states have every single gun control law that you can name today. In fact, in Colorado, they have red flag laws. They have restrictions on guns. Every bit of the gun control laws that are going to be put in place by the Biden executive orders already exist in Colorado, and yet there was still a mass shooting because of a person's criminal intent to harm and their questionable mental faculties. So again, we've debunked that, I believe, debunks the question of ghost guns. It removes the question of gun bans, because quite simply, like with a ghost gun, someone who has the intent can go out and get that gun. It is quite simple to show this, and let me show you why. And I'm going to give you an example of Binghamton, New York, which for the most part is similar to almost any part of America in terms of its distribution of people, in terms of its diversity, its economics. And in Binghamton, there was a 14-year-old male that is the suspect at shootings at Columbus Park and another shooting on January 11th of 2021. So, in this case, it's not a ghost gun. It's not a question of the gun being banned. He has a firearm that was a handgun reportedly, not a rifle, not an assault weapon, not a mass killing weapon. He had a handgun. The ban, whether executive order or by the Congress, would not have stopped this. It is ineffective. It doesn't target the issue of a 14-year-old trying to use an attack. Let's look at a different issue. What about a national red flag law, which would be in the Senate Bill S-292 offered by Marco Rubio, which we've highlighted before in this program? Would this case have been stopped by a red flag law? No. Because, again, this is a firearm that was illegally in the possession of a 14-year-old. It is illegal in New York State and virtually every state in America for a 14-year-old to own a firearm. And this is a firearm that he was not in legal possession of. So a crime has already been committed. And the use of this firearm was endangering others. Now, in that same household, the 31-year-old father of the 14-year-old suspect was also arrested on because he had a bench warrant out for burglary in the second degree. Would someone who is a criminal who has a warrant out for them, are they going to red flag their own child? Would that child want to red flag their own parent? It would seem not. And again, the red flag law doesn't prevent this. Other neighbors around them did not react to this. The school system, where New York State already has a red flag law, and it did not stop this event. In the same way, Colorado already has a red flag law that did not stop the mass shooting in Boulder. In fact, of the 18 states and Washington, D.C., red flag laws have existed for a long time. We've done a large number of work on this. We have done a lot of research on red flag laws, and none of them have been proven or shown a trend to stop mass shootings or gun violence or suicides. It has never happened. Even in the state of Connecticut, the very first place to have mass shootings, a red flag law to try and prevent mass shootings like Sandy Hook, does not stop any gun violence. There is no data for this, and all data that we have looked at that is available to the public since 1999 show no difference. It didn't stop the increase in homicides and gun violence in 2020 in any of those states. Why do we believe it's going to make a difference in 2021? And again, we're just using one example, but we'll give you another example. Let's look at Washington, D.C., where a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old were armed and carjacking a victim. Again, we run into the same problem, and there are more examples of this. Not only a 13 and 14-year-old boys, but a 13-year-old and 15-year-old girl who tasered a Uber user. But there's also another incident that can be pointed at where a 14 and 15-year-old were also arrested for having an armed carjacking with a firearm. So in each of those cases, as they have been reported, red flag laws did not stop any of those incidents. Gun registration did not stop any of those incidents. The ghost gun ban did not stop those incidents. And each and every one of them is an example of someone who had a illegal firearm that used it in the commission of a crime. None of these things affected them. None of these laws would stop them from being able to still. It is already illegal for them to do what they have done. Adding another law saying it's still illegal will not make it better. We're trying to make this very clear for you. We're using the examples that are out there, real world actions that these laws are not preventing. Ghost guns, not applicable. Possession is not applicable. The ban would not stop these things. These are handguns, not rifles. Most crimes are committed with handguns, not rifles, not shotguns. In fact, many times, as we've seen, we see other weapons like a taser or a knife are being used to commit these crimes. Actually, that's even more common. So the real question is, what's motivating teenagers to commit crimes, violent crimes? It isn't the possession of a gun, because they're doing it with knives and tasers as well. It's something else. We're not addressing that, and none of the executive orders being suggested by Joe Biden, nor any of those being suggested in Congress from Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, Senator Chris Murphy, Senator Marco Rubio, none of these are addressing the root problem. Let me look at something else then. Another point that is being brought up is background checks, age limits, and registration. These are the goals of the Joe Biden executive orders. And we're being told that this will make us safer, that if we expand the background checks that already exist, you will become safer. That if we have an age limit and make it harder for those who are legal adults to get a firearm by raising the age from 18 to 21 to maybe 24 or 26, this will make you safer. That if everyone is required to register a firearm, that they need a license to even try and possess a firearm, and then there is a ban on the type of firearm they are allowed to get, that this will make you safer. Again, I look at these two examples. We have 13, 14, 15-year-old children who are armed with firearms, and that these 13, 14, 15-year-old individuals are using firearms that are already illegal. The age limit, which already exists, did not stop them. The need for a registration that already exists did not stop them. The need for a background check, which already exists, did not stop them. Again, these key components being offered by the Biden administration are reflecting on the fact that these are already pre-existing things. The executive bans, executive orders have existed under President Obama until today. There have been and continue to be gun laws in place, 20,000 of them, over 20,000 of them, already in place at this time that address the same issues: background checks, age limits, registration, ghost guns, red flag laws. They already exist. These laws already are there. And yet, it does not work. It has not in any way stopped gun crime. It has not made you safer. So the actual idea behind these fail. Real world fail. There is nothing that is stopping a criminal or someone who has a criminal intent to harm others, someone who has a mental derangement that would allow them to harm others. There is no law that we're seeing that is being offered that will stop that. We are seeing laws that will stop you from being able to protect yourself. Because as we see as we reported, with the Ninth Circuit Court. You are being stopped from being able to protect yourself the moment you stepped outside your house. But you are not being made safer by any of these laws. Laws that already exist, that are already being broken, that are already being violated on a regular basis. So we go back to the question, can we debunk the gun control executive orders being suggested by Joe Biden? Can we debunk the gun control issue that is being promoted by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee in H.R. 127, the bill H.R. 8, in the Senate, S. 292 being offered by Senator Marco Rubio, the background checks being offered by Senator Murphy? Can we look at these bills and say they are ineffective? Yes, because by definition of what they want to do and what is already being done, they don't work. We know this. We see the numbers. We see the numbers from 2020. They don't work. They are not protecting American citizens. They are restricting American citizens. Not the same thing. And we can see that historically, since 1934, they have not stopped gun crime, mass shootings in any way. They continue to exist. There is a different cause than the firearm itself. Is this an extensive and all-encompassing debunking? No. Does it need to be? No. Because again, as we pose, that if the concept shows that this is illogical, that we have an illogical expectation of an outcome versus the reality that we have seen, if the law or an executive order is proposed and it does not function against what we know in the real world is happening, if it has no impact on that, then it is substantially and at its root flawed. Therefore, there is no point in it. There is no point to say we're going to increase the age limit when we know that already exists and it is already being violated. Saying that we're going to make the age limit higher doesn't stop those who are already violating that law and already abusing that. To say that we're going to expand the registrations or expand the background checks does not stop people who already either get the registered weapons, as we saw in Boulder and Atlanta, and it doesn't stop criminals who never get a background check in the first place, like the 14-year-olds that we're highlighting here. They never got a background check because they're not allowed to have a firearm in the first place. Making the background checks expanded still doesn't affect the crime that they are doing in Binghamton, New York, or in DC. It doesn't make you safer. It doesn't help you. This is a very simple overview. And again, this isn't about partisanship. This is about the laws, what they are proposing, and what is the reality that they are being put against. Will they make you safer? I see no evidence in the past or projecting to the future that would make me think that criminals are going to be less able to commit crimes. There is nothing in these laws that would stop a mentally deranged person from going out and continuing to cause harm. Therefore, the laws are ineffective. And at their core, they are flawed. And therefore, they are not the solution that we should be going for. They debunk themselves when placed into the real world. It sounds great on paper, but it's useless. But perhaps you think we're wrong. Perhaps these two examples are not enough. Perhaps our discussion and what we have shown you is not enough information, or you think that we've misunderstood. We look forward to seeing your comments, your statements, and what you think about this very essential issue that is going to affect everyone in America for decades to come at the least. Please, also, if you have found this to be informative or interesting, please like and share, and also, most importantly, subscribe so that more people can be involved in this expression of our First Amendment. And we hope to see you on every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for your comments and your expression of free speech. We thank you, and we hope you have a great day.